Hello and welcome to the video lecture series brought to you by St. Andrews Institute of Technology and Management. And we're discussing the subject called Object Technologies and Programming in Java, that is OTP, OT, and P. And today I'm going to discuss a type of paradigm that we have seen yesterday called object oriented methodology. And this particular paradigm will be the core focus of our discussion throughout this whole let's say course. Okay, so we are discussing the object oriented programming or methodology. So let's understand what is the object oriented methodology itself. So object oriented programming, or OOPS as we call it, is at the core of all the uh, object-oriented languages. That is, one of them is Java. Okay. Now we have studied that all computer codes consist of two elements. That is, code or programs consist of two elements. That is, code and data. And a program can be organized either around its code or around its data. Now, when a program is organized around the code, as we call it, the paradigm or the methodology will be called as the process oriented, where actually code acts on the data, and the process oriented model has been successfully implemented in the procedural languages like C. So you all must be familiar with C until now, because you must have passed the subject in your first year. So you all must be have a feel of process oriented methodology until now. However, as the application grows in size, they become more and more complex. And in second approach, which is called object oriented or OOPS, our application or program is organized around its data. Now, data is termed as objects in this particular, let's say, paradigm, and a set of interfaces to the data, that is, to communicate with the data. Thus, an object-oriented application is characterized as data control is controlling the access to the code. Now, as you can see, object-oriented paradigm is all about the class and the objects. The class, as you call it, as you can understand, is like the blueprint, and objects can be called as the living example of it, or the example of the blueprint which we can use. So as you can see in the figure, we have a human being here, and all the common traits of the human beings are actually defined in the class called human. So human must eat, human must breathe air, human must drink water, and all those things. Now, that is the basic character of all the human beings in the world. So, a basic class or the blueprint of human beings is created, in which the basic functions that a human must do to survive are defined. Or in this case, we don't call them as functions as you call them in C, we'll call here them as methods. Or if we are going to talk about an object-oriented language called Java in this course, because it is all about Java in the end in this course. So in Java, those functions that you have seen in your C are called as methods actually. So that is one and the same thing, almost. So there is a blueprint which is being called as classes here, and we will in that particular blueprint, that is class, will define some methods. Those methods are the general purpose methods which all the living examples of that blueprint or the living prototypes of that blueprint must follow. Okay, and when you create the actual prototype of the blueprint, which we call them as objects, will name them, and then those objects can use those methods that we have defined in the class to perform some task. Okay, so class in itself is actually dead or is on the papers only. Okay, so the actual implementation of the methods, that is the actual entity that is going to do something, is the object, and what it is going to do or what it can do is defined in the class by the help of methods. So a human being is a class, and an object could be a name, let's say anything, let's say Mickey. The name of the lady could be Mickey. So the Mickey is a living example of humans. Humans, as we define it, is the blueprint, it is the class, and the living example is the object. And she can send emails and verify emails. So these two methods, that is verify something and send emails, are actually defined in the human class itself. Okay, so you must have got the idea what a class will do. Class will define what we can and what an object can and cannot do. But at the end of the day, object is the one who's going to actually do that particular thing, not the class itself. Okay, and apart from the methods, we have one more thing, that is properties. Now, email and the address are the properties which uh, which we actually defines or we actually help by the methods to verify something. Okay, so the address will be used by the verify method, and email will be used by the send mail method. Okay, so properties and methods will combinedly form a class, and these two things will then be used by the prototype of the class called objects. So you must have got the idea now. It is everything about the objects. Okay, so it is not like you have first defined the methods and then you have defined the entity that is going to use that method. So first you have an idea about a prototype. So we have first created the blueprint of the prototype, and to make strong that particular prototype, you have created the methods. So methods are actually created keeping in mind the object and not the other way around, like in the procedural uh, languages or procedural paradigm or the methodology, where code will actually follow what kind of data we are going to tackle. While here, the data, that is the objects, will decide what is going to be the flow of the application. Okay, so I think we must have got the idea what I'm trying to say. So let's move ahead. Okay. Uh, Now we have few of the properties of the object-oriented programming or the methodology. These are the building blocks of the OOPS, that is polymorphism, inheritance, encapsulation, classes and object we have already talked about, and the abstraction. So let's talk about the abstraction first. What does it mean? An important element of object-oriented methodology is abstraction, and abstractions allows you to use a complex system without being overwhelmed by its complexity. A powerful way of managing abstraction is through the use of a hierarchical classification. The data from a traditional process oriented or the procedural code is transformed into component objects through abstraction, and a sequence of process steps then became a collection of messages between these objects. Now each object defines its own unique behavior, and these objects are treated as the concrete entities Now you tell them to do something by sending a message, and this forms the basis of your object-oriented methodology. Abstraction is like the end users are actually hidden from the complexity, or some of the objects are hidden from viewing the complexity behind a particular uh, task or while performing a particular task. So it's like you will be shown something only if you are required to, and not because you are a member of a particular application. Okay, so you need to know on the need to know basis, which is a very common saying actually. So let's move ahead. Uh, okay, one more thing. The abstraction allows you to use a complex system. Okay, we have done that, I think. Yeah. So let's move ahead. Now we are at the next one called encapsulation. Now this is the mechanism which binds the code and the data it manipulates. So it keeps both the code and the data safe from outside interference and misuse. Okay, so access to the code and data is possible only through well-defined interfaces. Interfaces means the communication links, okay, or the gateways, you can say that. Without or with encapsulation, everyone knows how to use the code regardless of the details of the implementation. The basis of encapsulation in OOPS is actually class. The class defines the structure and behavior, that is, the data and code that will be shared by the set of objects. And each object of a given class contains the structure and behavior defined by that particular class. The objects are referred to as the instances of the class or the living prototypes of the class. And thus, a class is a logical construct and an object is a physical reality of that particular construct. Okay, I think we have already gone through this analogy. So, and then again, the code and the data that constitutes a class are collectively called as member of the class. And the data that defines by the class are referred to as member variables or instance variables or the properties that we have seen in the last slide. And the code which operates on the data are referred to as member methods or methods only. Okay. The methods define how the member variables are used. Now, moving on to the next one called inheritance. Now, inheritance is the process by which an object acquires the properties of another object. Okay. Inheritance supports the concept of hierarchical classification. With the use of inheritance, an object would need to define only those qualities that make it unique within the class. It can inherit the general attributes from its parent class. For example, if you wanted to describe animals in an abstract manner, you would say that they have the attributes like size, intelligence, and something something. And they also have certain behavior that makes up the class definition of the animals. Okay. Mm. And the behavior could be like eat, breathe, and sleep. A more specific class of animal could be the mammals, which with some specific attributes like memory glands and all that. Now, this class would be a subclass of animals, and animal class is the superclass. I think you have got the analogy. Animal class is the superclass, and the mammal class is the child class or the children class. So, the mammal class actually inherited some of the properties of the animal class. This is actually inheritance in action. Now, the mammals would inherit all properties of animal class and have its own specific attributes also. So that is the beauty of the inheritance. It doesn't bound you. And now you can have more than one level of inheritance where a deeply inherited subclass will inherit all the attributes from each of its ancestors in the class hierarchy. If a given class encapsulates some attributes, then any class will have same attributes. That is, it will inherit all the attributes of all its ancestors as well as add its own specific characteristics. Now, coming on to the last one, that is polymorphism. Now, this is actually a feature which allows one interface to be used for a general class of action. Interface is again the gateway. Okay, now don't get confused if you don't understand the meaning of let's say interface. All you can say is it is the gateway to the several of the classes. So if you want to see the blueprint of few of the classes, so it could be possible that all of them are guarded by one particular interface, or the communication link is that particular interface, and if you got through that interface, you will be able to understand the all the other classes that are actually implementing the interface. Okay. So polymorphism is actually expressed as one interface, multiple methods. Thus, it is possible to design a generic interface to a group of related activities. Polymorphism helps in reducing complexity by allowing some interface to be used to specify a general class of action. The compiler would select the specific method as it applies to its situation, and the coder actually uh, needs to implement them. Okay, so I think we are done with the introduction to the OOPS methodology, and we have briefly seen what are its building blocks and what are their meanings. And tomorrow I am going to finish this introduction to this let's say subject, and we are going to see the difference between the OOPS and the procedural languages in one by one, like one by one fist fight. And after that, we're going to see all these building blocks of OOPS concept or the OOPS concepts one by one in detail. I will try to implement two of these in one lecture only, and after that, we'll actually dive into the Java and see the real world application of all these concepts. So, end this lecture now.